Hi everyone, Jane from Pandemonium Art Gallery here, and today we're going to paint a cute cardinal in a beautiful serene winter scene. Now I know this bird looks a little more complex than some of the other paintings that we've done, but it really isn't. It's just about layering color. That's all that's going on in here. And I'm going to walk you through it step by step so that you know exactly how to get your bird to look just like this one. Maybe not just like this one, your own version, and your own version is great. So if your bird doesn't look just like mine, that's totally cool. Your bird is gonna look like your bird. So make sure that you check out the description below for a full list of materials, and let's get started. For this painting, we're gonna use the following colors: titanium white, Mars black, burnt umber, Naphthol Crimson, Dioxazine Purple, Cadmium Red, and primary blue. And I've put them on my plate according to which colors I'll be using together. For example, in one area I'll be mixing black and brown together, so I made sure to put black and brown next to each other. Same with the red and the Dioxazine Purple. You can also tell about how much of each color I'm going to use by the amount of paint I've put out. So it's wise to start with a little less than you think you might need and put out more so you don't end up with a bunch of wasted paint at the end. I've done this painting a few times, so I pretty much know about how much paint I'll need. We're also going to need the following brushes: a 1-inch flat brush, a round brush with a nice point to it. You don't want it to be too terribly large. This one says it's a number 6, but a lot of companies have different sizes, so a number 6 in one brand might not be a number 6 in another. A 1/2-inch angle brush, and then you're just going to need some kind of brush that's kind of messed up. This used to be a brush with a nice sharp point, kind of like this brush, but as you can tell, it's puffed out and the bristles will no longer hold a point. So we're going to start by covering the background, and for this background I'm going to do a technique similar to my smoky background technique. My goal here is just to get this canvas covered quickly and not obsess over any little bits. We're going to start with our 1-inch flat brush, wet it in the jar, wipe off the excess a couple times on the edge, and I'm going to load up with white paint. That's going to be the main color that I use on my background here. And then I'm going to grab a little corner of blue and a little corner of black. And every time I go back for more paint, I'm going to pick up a slightly different mixture. So my brush strokes are going to be quick but controlled, and my focus is on covering the white, not necessarily on blending these together. As you're going through here, you may get some hard lines like that. Remember that we press the brush flat to lay color down and use the end of it to blend colors in. And that's how you can get those little lines blended out. Just white that time. My goal for this background is to almost make it look like it's a photograph of a bird, and that the background is just kind of blurred out. That if the camera would have focused on the background, you may see trees or the sky or clouds or any number of things. So we just want it to be kind of ambiguous. Very light pressure there to blend out the hard lines. I don't really care about the direction of my brush strokes. So many times when doing this background, people tend to focus on little tiny details, and in doing so, they don't cover their background quickly enough. Parts of it dry, and then they're focused on getting everything to blend back into that, and before you know it, they've repainted the entire background. So the quicker you move, the more likely you are to have an even background that you're happy with. Especially when you're just going for this kind of abstract type background that's really just setting a mood and offering a backdrop to our painting. you get a spot that's a little brighter than what you wanted it to be or a little darker, just get the end of the brush, scrub over it, and that'll take it right out. Draw the branch that our bird is going to sit on. However, we're not going to get into any detail at all. I'm really just going to make a line where that branch is going to be, and then we're going to paint our bird completely before we come back and add detail branches and highlights and lowlights to our branch. So I'm going to take my 1/2" angle brush and wet it in my jar. So I'm going to come over and grab a little bit of black and mix it in with my brown, because I don't want it to be too saturated in brown. That will make it look kind of fake. So I'm gonna grab a little hint of white, just get kind of this grayed down brown color. And always remember to drag the tip of your brush, the angle brush. I'm gonna start my branch just above the halfway mark on the right here. And I'm gonna come across like this, and as I go, I'm gonna slightly wiggle my brush a little to give it kind of a natural shape. Like that. You know, I've changed my mind. I'm actually gonna use my round brush here because it's gonna help me get more of that wiggly, knotted branch look. So I'm gonna load it up with my black, brown, white mixture. Remember to keep rolling it as you mix it in the paint. That will help keep the tip pointed. Okay. And again, this is just the base color of the branch, so if it's not exactly the color you want, that's fine. We're gonna paint over it completely. So I'm gonna put it over here and press a little flat so I get a wider line. And as I move toward the end, I'm going to roll the brush a little bit back and forth. And that takes a little bit of control away from me so I get that wiggly shape that I want. The reason I'm not filling it out, and I even left it a little fuzzy here, is because, again, we're gonna paint over it completely, but right here is, well, about right here is where my bird is gonna be, and I'm gonna paint him over the branch here. So there's no point in putting a lot of effort into that branch when I'm just gonna paint over it and have to paint it back in. So we're gonna let that dry because I don't wanna drag any of that brown or this background color into our red bird. We're now gonna start drawing our bird, and I want my bird to be right about here. So it's gonna be on this 1/3 of the canvas, almost on the line between the first 1/3 and the center 1/3. And for the bird, I'm not gonna go straight into my cadmium red because this color is kind of see-through and I wanna create a base color for him as well. So I'm gonna grab a little bit of this Dioxazine Purple and I'm gonna mix it with the red just until I have a deep red. See, that's just a little deeper than the cadmium red by itself. So I've got my round brush and I'm keeping it in that point. And I'm gonna have him be sitting on the branch with his body facing us, his tail hanging down the back, and we're gonna have his head turned to the side. So just picture where you want his bum to be, so right about there, and it's gonna be over top of the branch, so we don't have to worry about feet today. And then I'm gonna start drawing an oval. And as I draw this oval, I'm gonna continue to refine it until it's exactly the size and shape that I want. Keep the edges pretty crisp. Notice how I've got my hand on the canvas. That helps me maintain control. And I'm gonna make sure that his bum is just a little bit wider than the top of his body. So he's kind of egg-shaped. I think I want to make him a little bit bigger than that. So you can always go bigger, but you can't go smaller. So it's wise to start a little smaller than you actually want it to be. Starts to drag and it just feels sticky, just get a little more water on your brush. Now let's draw his head. Now the important thing with his head is you don't want to put it right on top of his body like a snowman. You're gonna have a hard time getting a natural shape. You want his head to start a little into his body. Just a little round head. And look at it and decide if you want it a little bigger. I think I'm gonna go just a little bit bigger. And let's draw his tail. So I'm gonna have his tail come off of his body here. Whoops. If you get a little bit that's outside, just get a damp brush. And wipe it away. So for his tail, we're gonna come off the edge of his body and just swoop it down right over top of the branch. I'm not really trying to make his tail any particular shape right now. That's just a placeholder for it. We're gonna come back in a little bit and detail his tail when we fill it in. So now let's do his crest. Now I want his head facing this way, so his crest is gonna be off the back. So I'm gonna come from here. It's kind of hard to paint around a camera sometimes, sorry. We're gonna come up here and just kind of flick. It doesn't have to be perfect right now. We're gonna add a couple different layers to it. Just get the basic shape in there. And now we're gonna make him not look like either a snowman or a Fisher-Price man. I always say that when they look like this, they look like those little plastic Fisher-Price people with the round heads. So I'm gonna come from his crest here, along the back of his head, and down into his back. And then let's go ahead and fill him in. Don't worry about his tail still, just his body. Get as even of coverage as you can. Sometimes with these see-through colors, like purple and red, it's a little difficult, but we're gonna add more layers on top. So if it's not perfect, that's okay. Just do the best you can right now. So even though we want our bird to be bright red, we're doing this deepened red as his base color because it is going to show through a little bit. If we just went with solid red, he would look almost like he was just drawn in with crayons. And at this point, your bird has probably got a little bit of a awkward shape. I know mine has got a fat back and a fat side on this side and a flat side on this side. But that's okay because you can keep refining it. So I'm just going to straighten this out a bit. Cardinal has a short beak. It's very short, but it's very wide at the where it attaches to his head. So we're going to come from here about where his crest ends, and we're going to go straight off of his face and down here a ways, come right up to that point. And then I'm just going to smooth that corner there and fill in his beak. For his tail, we're going to mix it the same color. And we're going to decide how long we want it. I want him to have a little bit of a longer tail, so I'm probably going to start it down here. And rather than doing the same brush stroke down and just giving him kind of a fuzzed out end of his tail, I want him to have a nice curvy shape that almost looks like feathers ending. So I'm going to take my brush and angle the point down. Right here at the length where I want it, I'm going to touch my brush to the canvas, press it a little bit flat, and streak it up. I'm going to do another one over here, and I might make this side just a little bit longer. Press it flat and streak it up. And then I'm going to add just little accent feathers off of the edge. So maybe one right here. So I'm putting my brush almost right on the line and then pressing it flat and gently streaking it up into it. If you put the point outside of his tail, you're gonna get this, it's gonna look like he's got a feather that's about to fall out. So just put it on the line and then press it flat. And then fill it in. Off my brush, and now what we're going to do is plan out where his highlights and lowlights are going to be. So I already know that I want this big area of his body here to be the really bright area, and around his sides where his wings would be and along his belly is going to be darker, and we'll talk about his tail in a minute. So what I'm going to do is just give myself a guide with it. I'm going to take some purple, maybe with just a hint of the red, and I'm going to draw a line from where his crest ends, down his back, around his belly, and back up this side, and under his chin a little bit. So almost like a lazy number 6. And you don't have to worry too much about what this looks like because it's really just a guide for you. So I'm getting mostly purple. There's a little bit of red in there. I'm using a little bit more paint because I want to be able to blend this in. So I've actually got quite a bit of paint on here. So I'm going to start here, and I'm just going to swipe down his back. Around his belly, make sure you don't go lower than the branch. Along this side, and I keep saying that this is his back, but it's not. It's his sides. So along his sides, and then just a little bit under his chin here. And now I'm going to get red quite a bit. And we're going to smooth that line out. Just kind of go over it a little. Because a hard line is going to be harder to cover than a smoothed out line. So what you're going to do with this is use this as your guide for shadows. That's it. So like I said, don't really sweat what it looks like. Okay, now we're gonna let this dry, and the reason I'm gonna let it dry is because if I start adding the feathers on top of this, I'm gonna pull that background color into the color I'm laying down, and I'm really just gonna get kind of a muddy mess. I want the color of the feathers to stand apart from everything else. So let this dry, and then we'll come back to it. While we wait for that to dry, let's go ahead and color in his tail. So I'm gonna pick up just purple. And I'm going to fill in all of this here. Now, except for that first line at the top, you want all of your brush strokes here to move downwards because that's the direction that his feathers move. Just let it fuzz out at the bottom. Now I'm going to get just red, even though I still have purple on my brush. And we're going to do the same thing we did here. Upside down, press your brush flat, and streak up. Any lines or streaks you get in there, just let them be there. Because now it looks like there's some different feathers in there. You can even go back in and add in a little bit of the purple if you feel like it's too solid red. All right, now that this is dry, we're gonna start adding our feathers. We're gonna use this round brush, and we don't want it to be too terribly wet because we want the paint to kind of stick where we touch it. So I'm gonna just wipe it on the edge of the jar. Normally I tell you not to do this with the round brush because it distorts the shape. But if this has a little bit of a flatter shape, that's actually gonna help us with our feathers. So again, we're gonna use the color here as a little bit of a guide to tell us what color of feathers to put. So I'm gonna start in this darker area with almost just purple. I'm gonna add a little bit of red into it, but very, very dark. So I'm gonna have the tip of the brush pointing up, and I'm not doing a brush stroke. There's no dragging here. I'm just gonna touch the brush to the canvas, press it a little bit, and that's it. I know that's kind of hard to see right now, but let's see. I do it on the bottom of the plate. Here's what I'm kind of doing. Touch, touch, just kind of like this all over. I'm not trying to cover all of the background. See how there's still some white? But they all kind of overlap a little bit. Some of them are heavier, some of them are lighter. And that's where that color that we laid down first is gonna show through. So that's about what we're trying to do. It's just touching and moving to the next one. Okay. So again, I've got my purple red, and I'm just gonna layer those all throughout here. I'm not worried if it goes over top of the line here into the tail. When you get to the edges over here, you do want to make sure that you don't go outside of that. So kind of stagger it. You don't want to just dot, 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 dot and draw a hard line because you're going to have a hard time transitioning into the next color. So you can take it up and out just a little bit. Now where this color is really dark and I'm trying to break up that line, when I get to these lighter areas, see I'm barely touching the tip of the brush to the canvas. It's just enough to give a hint of that color without leaving a big blob of it. All the way up the back of Mr. Bird's head. Oh, you can't see that yet. I'll wait until I move the camera. I want to make sure that I'm zoomed in nice and close for you here so that you can see exactly how this brush is touching the canvas. And you can go over it as many times as you want. You can add as many layers as you feel like you need. Okay, now you can see how this is working with the entire bird. So I'm concentrating the dark pretty heavily along the edges. And then lighter where the background color of the bird is a little bit lighter. Feel like you're getting carried away with the dark, I'm going to darken that line just a bit here. If you feel like you get a little carried away with the dark and that your bird is mostly dark and you don't have enough room for the brighter reds, that's okay. Just continue with what you're doing, because you can add the red over top of it and deepen that a bit. Just bring that really lightly. We don't want him to have a super dark spot under his chin here. We just wanted to know that it was a little bit more shadowed. More in here. Okay, now I'm going to start mixing some red in. So we're going to get a pretty deep red, a little bit deeper than, or yeah, pretty close to that. Just start with a color and see how it works. If it's too dark, add some more red. If it's too light, add some more purple. And we're gonna work down into that dark just a little bit. And now you can start to see how those colors are layering together to make it look like he's got shiny little feathers. So I had to stop my camera for a minute and notice how the color dries a little bit deeper. So this color I'm adding on right now is about the same color, but as it dried, it darkened a bit. So keep that in mind too. It might be a little bit too bright for you right now, but let it dry if you're not sure. See what happens, and then paint over it if it is. Make sure that you keep taking some of that lighter color down into the deeper color. Into this other color where your brighter red is going to be. Again, notice I am not doing brush strokes at all. It's just blotting. And I'll turn my brush when I use up all the paint off of that side. And turn it again. As quickly or as slowly as you're comfortable with. I worked kind of slow to show you what I was doing, but honestly, I'm not comfortable working that slowly. Sometimes when I try and work slow like that, I end up making blobs of paint that are bigger than I want to make them, or I make a little bit more of a line than I want to make. So I'm a little more comfortable going quickly. But if you're not comfortable going as quick as I am, then you can feel free to go nice and slow, like that. And that's not your ability or inability to paint quickly here is not, that doesn't have anything to do with your painting ability. It doesn't mean if you can't paint quickly like that on this, it doesn't mean that you aren't good. It just means that you just need more control. I think that when you go slower, you end up having a little bit more control over what the paint is doing. I like to have a little bit less, I think. Go ahead and take that color up here into his crest and just kind of flick it just a bit. All right, let's get it some bright red. I'm going to get just red. Quite a bit. And I'm going to start in the center and work my way out. A little bit too much paint there. Let me get a little bit of that off. Because I don't want blobs. I still want my nice little feather shape. And lightly working it out into that last color we just did. See how the little point of the brush, now you can start to see these little triangles in there. So it almost looks like feathers. Remember not to take this bright color over top of this shadow area here at his neck. Not until you've got it fully done then, and then you can look at it and decide if that shadow is too much. But for now, just leave it. Work that up a little into his head, a little closer to his face. You don't have to go all the way to his face though, that's gonna be a different brush stroke. But just get that started. And then again, we're gonna bring a little of this color with the edge of the brush and just kind of flick in there. And I'm gonna cover up that little spot. Now I'm gonna clean off my brush and we're gonna use one more color on him. So we're gonna use this Naphthol Crimson now. And this is one of my new favorite colors. But if you don't have it in your immediate possession, you can also use Cadmium Red Light Hue or, Cadmium Red Medium Hue. So we're gonna do the same thing. We're just gonna pick an area that we really wanna highlight and pat over that. Remember, break that up. Don't draw a big circle on his chest. It doesn't have to be a real symmetrical shape. You just want to make sure it fades out nicely. Now you can start to really see some of the depth in there where we've got this super bright color, but you can still see like this little spot that's dark, and that really gives depth to his feathers. Stand back and look at him and decide if you're missing any highlight areas. I really want to pop this spot. And then I feel like I have a little bit of a line going on right over here. If you can't get to bridge the gap between that super bright, and I did take it down into this darker color a little, if you're having a hard time bridging that gap, you can just grab a little bit more of your Cad Red, maybe a teeny tiny little hint of the purple, and just tap over that. See, now that little line that I was feeling there is gone. So don't let this intimidate you. Really just go over it and over it and over it. Add layer upon layer upon layer as much as you want. I think the more layers you have, the deeper his feathers are gonna look. Let's fill in that beak. Don't worry about what it looks like here where it connects to his head, because we're going to paint over all of that. So what we're going to do here is we're going to make his head look like a cardinal's head. And the cardinals have kind of this black plumage that goes from their beak toward their face, back, kind of in a fan shape. And all of these feathers on his head kind of move in that direction. So we're gonna add layers of black and the red to bring everything up into his comb. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start with the black and do his little black feathers, and then I'm gonna come back with the red and work the red in between the little black lines. If you're not comfortable with that, you're afraid that you're gonna smear the black too much into it, then you're fine to go ahead and do all of the red first and then come back afterwards and do the black. So again, with my little pointed brush, I'm gonna get a little bit of black. Make sure to keep the tip of the brush a very fine point. And I'm gonna start at his beak. I'm not gonna draw a perfect line. I'm gonna start at his beak and just feather out like that, kind of in a fan shape. Zoom me in there pretty close so you can see exactly what I'm doing. So I'm just doing these little flicks, and each one can be a little longer or shorter than the previous one. But down here toward his neck, they are longer. They're a little longer than the ones here in the middle. So I'm gonna work that down here. And then I think I'm even gonna give him a little bit of a little puffy black feathers poking out here. And then go ahead and make them longer wherever you feel like they need to be. They can come off of his head a bit. Using very little pressure, and my hand is on the canvas. And that's helping me get these tiny little wispy lines. Bring it out a little farther up here by where his eye is, because his eye is all inside of the black feathers. So we want to leave room for that. And I'm just going to clean it up at his beak. Get rid of these weird little bumps that I have going on there. I've cleaned off my brush again. Sorry, my camera's having a hard time focusing all that zoomed in. And I'm gonna get red, just red. And I'm gonna work that little feathery shape out from here. And make sure that you stay in kind of that fan shape. These little wispy lines are kind of covering that little shadow that I made under his chin, but it's not covering it completely, which indicates that it's still there a bit, and that's good. That's what we want. Now I've got a clean brush. We're just gonna get a little bit of naphthol and put some highlights in his tail. The same brush stroke as before. If it's too strong, again, just grab a little more cadmium and blend it out. And then we're gonna fill in his beak one more time so he's got a nice bright beak. Let's finish up his face real quick and then we'll move on to the branch. So for his eye, I've got my brush cleaned off. We're gonna get just a tiny dot of white, just a tiny dot of white. And we're gonna give him an eye in the black. Just put a little dot. The cool thing about working in the black part for his eye is if you don't like what you do, then just paint it black again and redo his eye. Now we're gonna give him a little bit of the flesh around his eye, because with just the little white dot, he's gonna look kind of fake and kind of startled. So we're gonna take a bit of black, just a tiny bit, and we're gonna mix up kind of a gray color. And then under his eye, from about the center of his eye, we're gonna do a slight curve and then a slight curve on the top. Cleaned off my brush again, and I'm just gonna get black. We're gonna give him a little line on his beak. Make sure that you don't give him like a smile, because he'll look strange. So we're just gonna start at the tip of his beak and work straight back. And you can even come back with a little hint of white and give him like a little shine. So there's our bird, he's done, and now we're gonna work on our branch. Okay, so now we're going to add some more detail branches. So I'm gonna grab a little black. My paint's kind of dry. It's been a little busy in the gallery here today, so I've had to keep stopping to handle customers. So I'm gonna mix some black and brown and get a little of my dried out white. Just mix up a color that's fairly similar to this first color that we did. Doesn't have to be exact. Add a little water to that. Okay, so I'm gonna start with one off right about here. Remember to twist your brush as you go. And give it kind of an interesting shape. I'm going to fill this branch back in a little bit under his belly. I'm going to make it a little more narrow so it's like his belly is covering a bit of it. This brush is starting to fray a little bit, like the other one that I showed you that had frayed out that wouldn't be good for doing things like this. This one is going to be there very soon, so you can see I'm having to work a little bit to get some sharper lines here, but I'm okay with that because that's kind of the look I want for this tree. My paint's been sitting out for a while. It gets dry a lot faster. I have to keep adding water to it. We're going to move to the angle brush, and my angle brush, my poor sad little angle brush, can you tell it's starting to fray out a bit too. So this angle brush, I'm going to need a new one. Actually, this one has probably outlived its usefulness for making the sharp little lines that I usually make with it, so I'm going to have to get me a new one. But again, I'm not going to throw it out. This one is, we're going to use it to do the bark on here, and it's going to make little stray lines that come out of it here and there. And I actually want that because it's going to help give the bark a little more of a realistic, organic type look, not the whimsical, really smooth, crisp lines that I usually do. So I'm okay with it being kind of frayed out. So I got me some fresh paint here since I was struggling with that paint drying out. So I'm going to mix up that gray brown again. Some white. Actually, I'm going to start with that right there. And I'm going to start by adding some little highlights. Now, if you've seen my Midnight Raven video and you saw the way I highlighted that branch, that's pretty much what we're going to be doing here. Except in that video, I only used black and white. So we're going to start by adding highlights to the top edges of all of these branches. And the brush stroke I'm going to use, I'm not going to go like this and just outline the entire branch. What I'm going to do is, along the branch, I'm going to make like dashes. Kind of like that type of a shape. So I'm going to be putting the brush, giving it some pressure, and just making these little dashes. You don't necessarily have to try and cover all of this color. Let some of it peek out a little bit. So I'm going to start over here. Remember, the long tip always drags. And if it goes a little outside, it's a little bit wet of a mixture. If it goes outside of the bark a little bit, outside of the branch, I'm okay with that. That's what this brush is going to do. If you don't want it to do that, make sure that you've got a very crisp edge on your brush. See, just little dashes. Here, I might intentionally flick it outside the edge. And now I'm going to grab a little bit of a darker color. I'm going to do the same thing underneath. Make sure to overlap that last color you just did. Do this before that color dries, because then they'll blend in together. And I'm actually going to grab just a hint of black and do a really dark low light on a couple spots, and then just kick it back a bit with So whenever I paint like this, I always get comments that I make it look easy. The reason I make it look easy is because I don't really care what it looks like. And that might sound weird, but I'm just kind of letting it do what it wants to do. I'll mix up a different mixture of my colors and just start overlapping other colors a little bit. And I really like the dimension that it gives me. So I've got a nice shadow going on there. Now I know I want a little bit of a brighter highlight on the top edge. So I'm just gonna add a little more in there. And if it's too bright, I don't care. I think that some people get hung up on things like this because they see that sharp white against the darker color with the hard line there, and they kind of freak out and they don't know what to do. And then they try and paint over it, but I'm not gonna paint over it. I'm gonna touch my brush right on top of the line between the white and the brown. I picked up about that mixture, and I'm just gonna touch just on the edge of it. I'm barely touching the canvas. I'm not really brush stroking. It's more like a touch and a flick. Touch and flick. So sometimes when you're having a hard time with something, in my experience anyway, with me, it's that I'm trying to control it too much. And when I try and control something too much, ironically, I lose control of it. But if I just let it go and just let it do what it wants to do, and not micromanage it so much, then I end up liking what I get better. So what I'm doing is just the tip of my brush is touching, and it's like a flick. You see that? To varying degrees, that's what I'm doing. Sometimes I put a little more pressure on it, sometimes a little less. But let me show you, I'm gonna get a little bit of black. I'm gonna make kind of a black line there. So now you can see that heavy black line against this lighter color. It's really hard to get my plate in here where you guys can see it while I'm zoomed. So I'm gonna grab some of this mid-tone color, and I'm gonna just touch over the edge of that black and flick it kind of in toward the lighter color. So see, when you're zoomed in like that, you can see exactly the little brush strokes that I made, and it kind of looks like a mess. But when I zoom you out, it's gonna almost look like little bits of bark that's peeling, or you know, a shadow and a piece of bark that's tucked up underneath another one. So don't be afraid to let a little bit of that control go and just see what happens. Also work wet on wet. So I already painted this part with my highlight color, but it's dry now, so it's not gonna blend in the way these last ones did. So I just painted it on there again. Way too much light there in that section. That's okay, I'm just gonna go ahead and keep on working this until I'm happy with it. And that's what I would also like for you to do. I like to work in a mess of colors, as you can see on my plate. If you're one of those people who hates it when your food touches, that might be a really hard thing for you to do. But trust me, just do it. It's so worth it. It's very satisfying to give up a little bit of control and just see what happens. kind of what impressionistic painting is about, I think, and that's really the kind of look I'm trying to give the branch here. Give a good dark shadow underneath the bird here. And I'm not going to really put a highlight on the branch right here, since the bird would be blocking out the light. If you get a spot that you just absolutely hate, like I just did there, then when we add our snow in a few minutes, just put your snow over top of it. No more spot that you hate. That's a little much highlight. So see, if you don't like something, just take it right back out. Okay, I'm gonna finish up this branch at the top, and then we'll start on our berries. Before we do snow, we're gonna put some berries on here, and you can add as many or as few berries as you like. You don't have to add any, but I like to add a little because it keeps, right now with him being so red, your eye is drawn right there and there it will stay. If we left the painting like this, that's where you would look and you wouldn't look anywhere else. But if we add some bright red berries throughout, that keeps your eye kind of jumping around from place to place on the canvas. So to make the berries, you can do it any way you like. You can get a paintbrush and scribble little circles all over. You can use the end of a paintbrush like we did for the light bulbs in the holiday bird painting. But I want a very consistent round shape that's a little bit larger than what I get with the end of a paintbrush. So I'm going to use the end of a pen. This pen has a flat end and it's about the size that I want for my berries. But you can use anything you want. You could even just take your finger and do it like that if you want a more organically shaped berry. So I've got the end of my pen, and my red paint's not too bad dry. So I'm just gonna dip it in there and get a little bit and just start making some little dots everywhere. And they don't have to be on the branch. They can be falling away. They can be right on the branch like that. It can be totally disconnected. I just want to make sure that they're all round. So I'm just going to add some berries all over the place in this cadmium red. Okay, now I'm going to wipe off the end of my pen. This is a good way to mark your pen so that nobody steals it from you. Now I can prove this is my pen. It's the one that's covered in cadmium red. Now I'm going to grab just a little bit of this Naphthol Crimson, and I think I'm going to add a couple berries here and there in this color. Not too many. Just to give a little variety. You could even add some of the purple ones if you wanted. Now I'm going to take the end of a round brush. This has kind of a small end. It's the end to the little round brush that I was using. I'm going to dunk it in the white and just add a couple little highlight spots to some of these berries. Not to all of them. You could do all of them if you wanted. Okay, last time we're gonna let everything dry before we come put the snow on, and that's to make sure that we don't pull up any of this brown or that any of the berries that might get covered by the snow, that they're not still wet. All right, our last thing is we're gonna add some snow on top of the branches here and there. So I've taken my destroyed brush and I've wet it a little bit, and you can see now how it's totally messed up. That messed up brush end is gonna help us out here. So I'm gonna get a little bit of white, tap it off around here, just so I don't have too much. And just decide where you want some snow and just kind of scribble it on right onto the tree. You can use the paint a little heavier. I was thinking about clouds. Kind of the similar thing to my clouds video. Just kind of a random little scribble. Try and keep soft shapes, so you don't want like a jagged point. I might put a little bit right here, kind of over top of that berry. That's all right if you lose a berry. Just add it wherever you think you need it. I'm gonna make sure to put some right here where I hated that piece of the stick. And there's our cute cardinal winter scene. I hope you had a great time painting this with me, and I can't wait until you guys start sharing all of your paintings with me. That really is my favorite part of every video that I do, is you guys sharing your paintings on my Facebook page. Take this and get really creative. You could even mix both the Midnight Raven video and this video, and maybe paint this bird in the position that the raven is painted in the Midnight Raven video. Make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe, and as always, let me know what videos you would like to see next. Also, this is the last video that I'll be posting in 2015, and I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who has subscribed and who leaves me comments. The support and your nice comments have really encouraged me to keep putting out videos for these last few months, and so I'm really excited to see what we do together in 2016. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in 2016.